from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word, another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. Today is Friday, December 25th, 2020. We're getting close to the end of the year. Got a busy program today. I'm going to get right into it. COVID-19, what is that costing America exactly? We talk a lot about all the ramifications. We talk about masks. We talk about vaccines. But we haven't talked about the cost for quite a while. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to follow through what we began last week on systematic destruction of America. Today we're going to tie it into media. We're going to show you how the media is complicit to help bring this nation down. And then we're going to have, which ties all of this together, where God warns us about lying witnesses. You ready? Let's get right into our program. COVID-19, the cost. Now, we began talking about this way back in May, as I'm going to show you today. So does anyone really know what the COVID-19 is costing America? There's so many aspects to it, it's really hard to put into place. We began looking at this way back May 15th, and we took just one aspect of it back there. This was paying for the COVID-19 trackers. This is simply money that they needed to hire people so that if you were exposed to COVID, they had people can go to other people's houses and say, listen, you need to stay where you are, and begin to separate everybody because they might be contagious. So we began tracking that way back then. All of this came under House, it was a bill, the House Bill 6666, and you can't make that up either. Yeah. You know, you look at Revelation 666, I mean, I tell you what, I mean, you can't get much closer than that. I mean, that's a real number. I'm not putting that, I didn't make that up. It's called House Bill 6666, was the 116th Congress. This is for 2019 and 2020, right, for back then. The Section 1, the short title, it says that this act may be cited as the COVID-19 testing, reaching, and contacting everyone, or the TRACE Act. In case you wonder what the TRACE Act, this is exactly what it is. So we asked the question back then, how is this going to be paid for? So we come up with this. We found out the information. Authorization of appropriations, $100 billion. That's right, billion, not million. $100 billion simply to track how this virus is going to be transmitted, to bring it to other people. I got to wonder something. I don't know how many people they hired everywhere, but I know it isn't what they thought they were going to do. Where does all that money go to? Who's got control of all of that? They've authorized it to be out there. $100 billion. Now, that's just for 2020. It goes on to say in Part 2, such sums as may be necessary for each of the fiscal year 2021 and subsequent years afterwards. So this is just for 2020. Now we're going to have whatever money you need for 2021, 2022, and whatever goes on. So it's already built in, so they don't have to go back to Congress to get money. So it's already there, it's already said, and it's already done. In other words, money is no object. And as we just seen in our government, again, writing 2 more bills that'll probably be signed into law, we just spent, again, $2 trillion of money we don't have to help everyone. I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes. So what might the COVID cost the U.S.? Now, that was just to track it, $100 billion. According to Harvard, now this is a Harvard Gazette, this is a team of experts out of Harvard, they have estimated what it's going to cost. Try $16 trillion. Now, I'm not making this up. And this is, you can't make it up, because this is what it is. A pair of Harvard economists estimates that the coronavirus pandemic will cost the nation at least $16 trillion if it ends by next fall. Now, this is talking about loss in revenue, wages, businesses, jobs, the actual spending money, everything that goes into it, costing approximately $16 trillion. That is if it ends by next fall. Timing describes as optimistic. So now they have a vaccine. They think that, well, maybe this will work by next fall. So how is this affecting the U.S. debt? Now, this is the big one. This is really, really important what's going on here. Because you could spend it, but you can't make it. I mean, so you're making less and you're giving more, or you're spending more. So it all goes down to this. $27 trillion right now. The U.S. debt right now stands at 27. When I put this up, it'll be worse than that now. $27.4 trillion. You know the U.S. spends approximately $1 billion every 80 minutes? $1 billion approximately every 80 minutes. The United States is spending right now. So the U.S. debt now is at $27 trillion. And we just approved $2 trillion last night. Now, let me tell you something. In that bill, in case you're wondering, I don't have everything that is going for that. This just came out just last night. Domestic spending in that bill, $26 billion to the Kennedy Center. Smithsonian Institute, $1 billion. I'm sorry, Kennedy Center was $26 million. Smithsonian is $1 billion. National Art Gallery, $154 million. The National Arts of Humanities, $167 million. And the Wilson Center, whoever they are, $14 million. Now, that's not bad enough. Let me show you what else is going out. This is foreign countries. Egypt. Now, I'm not sure why we given to foreign countries an emergency spending for what we need here for American citizens, but this is what they agreed to. Egypt, $1.3 billion. The Sudan, $700 million. Ukraine, $453 million. Israel, $500 million. Nepal, $130 million. Burma, $135 million. Cambodia, $85 million. Pakistan, $25 million. And then Asia. And then it's from Asia or IA. I'm not sure who that is. Maybe there's a bunch of countries over there. Another $1.4 billion. Now understand we're in debt already $27 trillion. But we're talking about giving away another. Money is no object. Right? Money is no object. We just should do that. So now let's take a look at this and put this in perspective of where we are as a nation. Because God says you're no longer going to be the lender, you're going to be the borrower. But I'm going to show you how fast in the deterioration we're going. From 1776 to 2008, the U.S. debt grew to $9 trillion. From 2008 to 2017, the debt grew another $9 trillion to $18 trillion. You know, plus or minus a couple $100 billion thrown in here and there. And then from 2017 to 2020, the last 4 years, it grew another $9 trillion to $27 trillion. So for the first 232 years, it took us to get to $9 trillion. Then under the Obama administration, it took 8 years to get another $9 trillion in debt. And then under this administration, we grew in 4 years, that debt. Can you see how fast we're deteriorating? For those who don't understand the laws of what God says was going to happen to us and the duality of the physical versus the spiritual, we understand that the very first thing that brought ancient Israel into captivity is the economic loss. Well, we're here. We're here right now. I made this up before last night, on Monday night, before Congress agreed to make a $1.4 trillion advance to keep the government open until September, and another $900 billion for an emergency repair of some of the things that I just spoke to you about. So depending on when they actually fund the money before the end of the year in this administration, this could go up another $1.5 to $2 trillion before January 20th. Try to imagine that. But that's how fast things are deteriorating. Once the next administration comes in, they're agreeing they want to raise and spend $2 trillion for beginning green funding, which is going to help go to the rest of the world to help finance the stop of the collapse of the world. Nobody has this money, but they're going to make it up and they're going to send it anyway. We're not going to realize the depth of the pain of what's coming to this nation until the dollar is no longer the center of the world. When the rest of the world moves off the dollar as the monetary system, you're going to begin to see the fall of this nation. And it will come, and it will come quickly, as God talked about. Let me take a look at one more thing, because when you look at this chart here, this is, if you go online and you look at it online, I mean, these numbers are moving so fast to make your head spin. So there's one more area I want to bring out. It's right here. I want to bring this out. So let me enlarge that for you now. So here it's called the currency and debt derivatives. If you heard about derivatives, people who don't know what they are, is a derivative is if you have an account with the bank, and let's say they're going to give you credit for $1 million because you have so much equity for that million. Well, what they're doing now, the banks are saying, well, you're only going to spend so much of that, and there's only so much of a risk, so now I'm going to give you $5 million in debt, credit. So that, in other words, what you own, you begin expanding on the debt on what you own as your guarantee. So as the guarantee is like, normally you would need like a 50% guarantee to pay it back. But now you only have to guarantee 25% or guarantee 10%. So now it's the derivatives is where it's going to. So now if you can look at this, just go ahead and keep, let's see this bottom one here? Let's go ahead and pull that one up, Jeff. I'm going to see the chart, but you see the bottom of those two numbers? In the year 2000, we had currency and debt derivatives of $93 trillion. Now we have $614 trillion. That means there's enough debt for $614 trillion on the same equity that we have. In other words, when it collapses, try to imagine how many people is not going to get paid. That's just what's going on right now. In addition to this, now I don't know if they put this in the bill or they're going to extend it or not, but December 31st is going to be D-Day for people who owe rent and mortgages. There was a clause in the government spending that protected people. If you didn't have money, your landlord couldn't throw you out. Or if you couldn't pay your note, the mortgage company couldn't throw you out. That all ends December 31st. They estimate there could be as many as 16 million people under that bubble of protection right now. So I don't know what's going to happen at that particular point, but you're beginning to look at a firestorm could open up really, really soon going into 2020. Now, this is just the top of the iceberg. All this hoopla and how great and everything's going to be, it isn't there. It just isn't there, and it hasn't been there for a long, long time. So anyway, I wanted to bring that out because we hadn't talked about the debt in a while. We're going to be going through some more of this later. I want to go through the bankruptcies that's into it, the foreclosures that's into it. That's already taken place this past year. So there's lots and lots to talk about in the weeks and months ahead. But there it is. That's 2000, 93 trillion, and above it is $614 trillion. All right. Now let's move on. We have here what I'm going to call today as a threefold assault on our youth. And when we pull this together, I'm going to show you how a lot of this is tied into what was going on last summer, the Black Lives Matter, the protests, and how it's now going to begin to filter into the school systems on our children. All right, so let's go into this now. The first one of the threefold assault. In the state of Washington, they got a House Bill 2288. It's actually been around now for a little over a year, and it comes up in January again. It's called Establishing Health Centers in Schools. Sounds like a pretty decent idea. Parents shut down legislature while speaking against school health centers. Now, why is that a problem? So it doesn't seem like a bad idea until you understand that the parents, starting at the age of 13, have been completely cut out from knowing what their children are receiving in their medical and mental health care at the schools. So what they're doing now is no longer do you go home and your parents would take the children to the doctor. They're building health centers actually in schools. And the parents are required to sign a form that allows the health center to treat the children while they're at school in case something happens to them. But they don't have to tell the parents what's going on. So what's going on here? They're referring to a new law that went into effect this year that keeps sensitive conditions, and look what they put under sensitive conditions, including anxiety and depression, gender dysphoria, STDs, and reproductive issues, confidential between healthcare providers and patients over the age of 13. So the children now can go in with all kinds of disorders. Maybe they feel they're in, I don't want to be a girl no more, I want to be a boy. I don't want to be a boy, I want to be a girl. They can go through reproductive issues, abortion, protection of sexual matters. All of these things now will be protected and hidden from the parents. It's going to be a license for kids to be able to do what they want because they no longer have to face the parents. So that's one. Another story, and I'm putting this one, even though it's the second story, I'm putting this in You Can't Make This Up. Here, transgender activists called for all children to be put on puberty blockers. All children. No, I'm not making that up. So this is the second assault on children. Can you imagine that the law will actually put where every single child will be put on puberty blockers? Transgender activists calls for all children to be placed on puberty blockers until they can decide their gender. We want to give them a chance to decide if they were born a girl, if they really want to be a girl or not. And here's the reasoning that goes behind it. The transgender activist known popularly as Zena Jones, that is a guy, all right, is publicly advocating a policy that would put all children on puberty blockers until they can decide to grow up. What's the reason? Here's the reason. His real name, McNamara, said that since children already are consenting to the permanent, irreversible changes that come naturally through puberty. Let me put this in perspective. That means because since children automatically just grow up, they accept it, then we have a right to let them know they don't have to accept that. They can change it. It says that permanently and irreversible change. Yeah, it's what God created. If you were born a girl, you're a girl. You grow up to be a woman. If you're born a boy, you grow up to be a man. You know, and if we can accept that, why can't we accept that we could change it? Unbelievable. That's the reasoning behind this. And now they're telling us they want every child to be able to have puberty blockers. So if you're going to be a grown woman or a grown man, you don't have to have that. We're going to stop that till you decide what you want to be. I'm not making this up. So they should be allowed to legally consent to puberty blocking hormone treatments as well. So if you can naturally agree you're going to grow up, then you can naturally agree that you can grow up any way you want. Well, anyway, that's the second assault. Sounds rational, doesn't it? All right, number 3. Now, this is important here because this ties into the 3 videos I'm going to play a little bit later. Actually, that's why I actually brought the videos in, is what I'm going to talk about right here. Schools now are preparing to train children in Marxist Black Lives Matter curriculum. That's what's actually going to go into the school system. Activist educators allowing radical movement to warp the students' worldviews. This is from World.net Daily. It said public schools nationwide are adopting the Black Lives Matter curriculum, presenting themes such as systemic racism, police brutality, and white privilege while teaching children the theology of Marxism according to the Federalist. So now we're going to teach them that under the system we live today, under the constitutional society that we are today, the Republic, they're going to begin teaching them Marxism and all the other issues that come in there. That's already in play. Whether a parent likes it or not, it has no choice in the matter. That's already in play. They're beginning to put the books and have everything ready. So now, I want to show 3 videos on the BLM changing America in the revising of history. The first one is the penalties for disagreeing with the consequences of disagreeing with the mainstream. All right, so let's play the first one, and then we'll talk about the second in just a second.
Ashley Bennett taught special education for 27 years at the North Penn School District in Philadelphia. In July, she was fired for criticizing BLM in a private Facebook post. Here's what she wrote, quote, "I see signs all over saying Black Lives Matter. I'm just trying to figure out which Black Lives Matter. It can't be the unborn black babies. They are being destroyed without a second thought. It's not black cops. They don't seem to matter much at all. So which Black Lives Matter? Again." Those are entirely fair questions, obviously, but according to the school district she worked for, quote, "The views expressed conflict with our work to develop a community that values diversity." Ashley Bennett justly is now suing the school district. She joins us tonight with her attorney, Francis Malafie. Thanks, both of you, for coming on. So, Ashley,
Thank you for having
to
us.
you,
Thank
these were written, I just want to be completely clear, on a private Facebook page. This is not something that you put in the window of your classroom, correct?
Correct. It was a post that I had actually seen on Facebook, and I actually shared it. And so it was, again, not my words, but I did share the post because I thought that they raised it raised valid points and valid questions. I was trying to show support of all Black lives. If Black lives matter, all Black lives matter. So that was my intent in sharing the post. It certainly was not meant to be in any way offensive. And I woke up one morning and my world and my career and my life was basically turned upside down when I was blindsided by North Penn and Mia Kim, the HR director, by basically calling me a racist and telling me that my thoughts and my visions did not align with theirs. And after 27 years of being in the field of special education and fighting for people with disabilities and students with disabilities of all races, I was completely blindsided. And I have been, over the past 6 months, my life has completely been turned upside down, destroyed. My family has been suffering, and it's just been a horrible situation that I hope no one else ever has to go through.
I don't recognize this country sometimes. You were defending Black lives, the lives of Black children, Black police officers. They're human beings too. I guess your school doesn't recognize that. Francis, is this legal? Can you go to someone's Facebook page, an employee's Facebook page in a school district and say, I don't agree with your political views, and fire that person?
You absolutely cannot. We have the First Amendment. It's a constitutional right. And Ashley Bennett had every right in posting what she posted and expressing her views, her political views. You know, the First Amendment protects a person in disagreeing with their government. When the school district basically endorsed the Black Lives Matter movement and basically said that Ashley Bennett and what she had done in critiquing it misaligned with the core values of the district, it basically admitted liability in this case. The district knows this. This conduct is indefensible. They violated the constitutional right, the First Amendment, which is one of the greatest rights we have and distinguishes this country from every other country out there. And we're going to fight hard to make sure that she gets justice and make sure that the district's held accountable. North Penn is not North Korea, and we have to make sure that administrators are not violating their duties when they're put in positions of power, because it's not just the teachers and administrators, it's also the students.
It's the kids.
All right, there's two things here I want to bring to your attention. First of all, we just mentioned how they're bringing in the BLM into the school system, teaching the children. According to Marxism, because they want to teach Marxism to the children, according to Marxism, there are consequences for disagreeing with the government. You pay a price for that. There is no more free speech. You don't agree with them, then you pay a consequence. For example, that lady, even though it was misunderstood what her intentions was, because she was a teacher for 27 years, and she served the needy, those who are handicapped in schools, and she was trying to say, listen, every life does matter. That goes against the narrative, and of course, after 27 years, she's simply just fired, and that's what a Marxist society can do. And basically, that's what's coming. So the second thing is profiting from the agreeing with the violence and the anarchy. You're not going to believe how much has been put into the BLM movement, which is now moving into the Congress. It's going in, people are being voted in who are agreeing with all this, and now putting it into the school systems to teach the children. Let's play the second video.
So as all of this was going on over the summer, what were BLM activists doing in America? Well, here's what they were doing.
We gotta be screaming!
So much destruction. How's Kenosha tonight? Still destroyed. So many cities are. How'd this happen? Well, some of our biggest corporations, publicly traded corporations, paid for this. Why? Well, we're not going to get into motive here, but we got to tell you, a lot of those companies are richer than they've ever been, coming out of lockdowns and riots, both of which they supported. An analysis in the Washington Post found that 45 out of the 50 largest companies in the country have turned a profit since March, in some cases big profits. The top executive at Nike, John Donahoe, put it this way, quote, "These are times when the strong can get stronger." The CEO of a gaming hardware company said something similar, quote, "With all that's happening around the world, it's really unfortunate, but it's made the gaming the largest entertainment medium in the world." Now, this does seem unfair. The smallest businesses are destroyed, owners sometimes killed. But if you ask Kamala Harris, BLM is on the right track. They did the right thing. Small businesses are gone in a lot of places, including in our nation's capital, but the big corporations are fine, so Kamala Harris is content.
The brilliance and the impact of Black Lives Matter and their brilliance in conceiving it, history is going to show was an inflection point in the ongoing fight for justice, to your point. Nothing that we have achieved in our country that has been about progress, in particular around civil rights, has come without a fight.
Now, as much as I hate to say it, she's right. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant to be able to take the anarchy and destruction and use that to help change the nation. As you're going to see, there's billions and billions of dollars pulled into this society. Now, if you're still thinking this is black and white, you got a real problem, because you got to see beyond that. This is the anarchy that begins to change the nation. This is what God says at the end time, the nation, the laws, according to the prophecy given to us from Daniel, would actually come into play. It would take this type of change to change the Constitution. Now, early on, you would say that the Black Lives Matter movement was hijacked by the anarchists. That's far from the truth. What they have found out is the Black Lives Matter used the anarchists and funded them to be able to walk with them to use this to create the problem and the chaos. Now, that alone is a problem. So how did they use businesses to support this? They raised the funds so that when people got arrested, there was a fund that they immediately had a lawyer in the police stations and the courthouses to pay the fines and to get them out, and to have the charges turned over and dropped. All that's been going on behind the scenes, while the billions of dollars continue to pour in from many of these countries. The third thing that comes into play, the changing of the history, the laws, and the foundation of the nation, and this is the BLM's revisionist history and the changing of America. All right, so this is the third one in the interview. Let's play that.
Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. We're happy to have him on tonight. Professor, trying to see the bigger picture here, and it didn't escape our attention that the biggest companies are richer than they've ever been, while their competition has disappeared in a lot of cases. Is there a connection?
Yeah, I think the connection with BLM is relevant too, according to what Vice President-elect apparently Harris has said. BLM, remember, Tucker, was founded by neo-Marxists, three of them, Garza and Tometi and Cuellar's. And they said that it was during the Trayvon Martin disaster, tragedy, whatever you want to call it. They became the funnel for corporate largesse, kind of this generation's replacement of Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. So when the George Floyd tragedy happened, corporate America enriched in ways that are unimaginable this bi-coastal culture because of the Zoom, Skype economy, Amazon, etc. They became the receptacle. About $10 billion or more came into the hands of BLM. It was probably the most successful capitalist-socialist we've ever seen in the history of philanthropy. And then they institutionalized certain ideas that we all had to accept. Critical legal theory, that old white men made laws that don't have to be followed because they were innately oppressive. And therefore looting, all summer, looting and arson by Antifa and BLM were excused because of the ideology or the race of the perpetrators. And then they also, remember, said that, and this gets back to your point, class doesn't matter very much anymore. Ideology and race matter. So we're in this ridiculous situation that Oprah is a victim, or Jay-Z is a victim, or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a victim, but an out-of-work coal miner in Appalachia is not, or a truck driver in Reno is not. And then they kind of hijacked American history. They said that the founding was in 1619, which was not true. And we're deplatforming, Time Magazine deplatformed Helen Keller, of all people. San Francisco is renaming a school because Abraham Lincoln, who really saved the Union and stopped slavery, is somehow a racist because he's not perfect by our standards. And it's going to continue. This is the most frightening period in my life, and I think it's reminiscent of the McCarthy period. And I just don't think we can let it happen. I know that my father grew up in poverty, and he flew 40 missions in a B-29 over Japan, and his cousin who was adopted was killed, my namesake, on Okinawa. And I'm just not ready to accept that those two good men were racist by virtue of their skin color, and they fought for a racist country that was inherently flawed. That's where we are, and unless people speak out, it's going to be perpetuated. Each, according to our station, says you're not, BLM, going to hijack the totality of American history because it's not perfect. It's good. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's better than the alternative, and that's what it's about. And it's very disturbing to hear these stories tonight about intolerance. I just hope we can speak out, all of us.
That's one of the most stirring summations I've heard in a long time. Victor Davis Hanson, thank you for that. And you're right, speaking out is the only solution.
As he concluded, he says, I just hope we can all speak out against this. You're going to find that's going to be less and less possible because the media now is beginning to control the narrative of what actually gets out and what is not. So this is part of the systematic destruction. So as you can see, we're putting these things together into pieces. Unfortunately, America's not going to see all this because they don't understand the future of America, what God says is going to happen to it. And so until you look at how it's happened in the past, you won't understand what's coming in the future. So in this systematic destruction of America, we started this series last week. So today what I want to do is I want to just bring out another aspect of it, the dishonest and complicit media, the social media, talking about that in government. For BLM to be successful, they had to have had the support of the media and the left government, and they did. Now, for example, YouTube censors just recently, and all these things continue to mount day after day, the attorneys at the Senate hearing on election fraud. This was quite interesting. This was in Congress under oath, or I think the Senate, and it was under oath, and it was on C-SPAN. Anybody could watch it. But on the replay to YouTube, they didn't want you to hear any of the evidence that was being supported in the case about election fraud. So the YouTube removed Trump's lawyer's opening statement from the Senate committee hearing. It says one of the President Trump's lawyers said to YouTube removed his opening statement from the Senate Homeland Security hearing on election fraud. YouTube has decided that the opening statement in the U.S. Senate, given under oath and based on hard evidence, was too dangerous for you to see, so they removed it. To this day, our evidence has never been refuted, only ignored. And this is one of the things I talked about in the sermon I just recently gave in part 2 on America Got What It Asked For. So more and more what you're finding is the censoring. So now, you might find the subject objectionable to even talk about these days. You know, the election's over, let's move on. But without understanding right from wrong, the legalities of it all, and understanding how the Constitution was broken in each of a minimum of 4 states, and how the Supreme Court was obligated by law. They had no choice. They were supposed to listen. They simply ignored it. So the case was brought to the Senate to say, here's what we have as evidence. Well, YouTube says, no, we're not going to play it because it isn't provable. And everyone says it isn't provable, but they haven't heard the evidence. And so therein lies the rub over and over and over again. Maybe it means not much now to a lot of people because this is an election. But you need to understand something. In Germany, it was the same way. The Jews who saw what was coming got out of Germany and got out of Europe. Here in America, there's nowhere to go. And what's going to continue to happen, whatever subject is next, and it might be you, it might be your parents or their business. Maybe it's our belief that's going to be on a chopping block, and it will. It will come to that. It will be the same way that there will be people who will come in, and they will talk about what this rotten church believes and how horrible and racist they are because they don't believe in the LGBTQ movement. That is what is going to come. You cannot understand what's going on now and realize what's going to happen later because it's coming. So if you ignore it, you will ignore it to your peril. So now, let me give you one more example. This is for the battle for a new VOA director. Who's the VOA? It's called the Voice of America. The VOA is funded by the U.S. government through the U.S. Agency for Global Media. The Voice of America began broadcasting in 1942 to combat Nazi propaganda with accurate and unbiased news information. Ever since then, the VOA has served the world with a consistent message of truth, hope, and inspiration. But now they've got someone they want to bring in as the new director. Now we got a problem. He doesn't agree with the narrative. Remember the school teacher I showed you just a few minutes ago. She made something that they didn't agree with, fire her and get her out of there. The VOA nominee fight for the Washington Post and insist that Christians can no longer hold public office. This is a policy now that's being promoted by the Washington Post. If you are a Christian, you cannot hold a position in public office. That is the position that they're taking. The media now has normalized anti-religious bigotry that threatens to remove faithful Christians, be they Catholic or anything else, from public service. The Washington Post has mounted a coordinated attack on Robert O'Reilly, the new nominee for the VOA director. By the way, he was a director for 2 years back in the early 2000s, 2002, I believe it was. And for 10 years before that, for the VOA, he was the voice in radio for 10 years for VOA. All right, so to show you how things have been changing. The new nominee, VOA director, claiming he is an existential threat to the organization's mission to provide independent reporting to foreign audiences. They reported Riley is dangerous because he believes what the Catholic Church teaches on sexuality. Now think about that. You know, we don't support the Catholic Church. If you follow our program, you understand where we feel the Catholic Church stands in Revelation and the Beast. But now think about what's going on here. Because he agrees with their theology on sexuality, in other words, no abortion, even though it's been changing little by little here and there, he's dangerous, which is ironic to say the least given the legacy of the media's favorable coverage of Joe Biden said he's a good Catholic in good standing in his version of it. The Washington Post, meanwhile, messages that Biden, who has been publicly censored by numerous Catholic clerics, will promote a different understanding of what a Catholic in good standing looks like. In other words, according to the Washington Post version of a Catholicism, will be allowed in Washington, and only that version will be allowed. The Joe Biden version, not the real version, not the true Catholic version that has been there for thousands of years. Can you see how things are changing? So what I just did is I took the same subject and I moved it off of black and white. Because you see, when you get your mind with black and white, you miss issues. So then what I moved it to now is mainstream media and religion. Same subject, same problem. That's what's going on here, is they control the media on what they get out there. There's a word for it, the article says, it's called bigotry. And that's what's going on right now. The government-run persecution is coming for the Christians in the USA. If you don't believe it, then you're blind. This is a letter to a Democratic group in Congress just sent to Biden-Harris transition team. And you need to be aware of this. In fact, this is so important. At the very end today of this session, I've got the entire link. It's a lot of letters and numbers, but you need to go and read it. It's about 25, 27 pages long. It's called Restoring Constitutional Secularism and Patriotic Pluralism in the White House. Now, that language is crazy. They make up all kinds of words to make it sound so nice what's going on here. Secularism Democrats of America, the SDA. Now, the SDA, it looks like Seventh-day Adventists. It's not. They're talking about the Secular Democrats of America. Has prepared this document for Biden-Harris team campaign to provide recommendations that will not only reverse the damage done by the Trump administration, but to boldly restore a vision of a constitutional secularism and respect for the land of religious and intellectual pluralism. They write such just wonderful things. The document of the danger of the document. Basically, it set the framework to strip Christians of all their liberties. Now, I went through and I read it. I went back through and I reread it. And sure enough, that's what it's doing here. It's beginning to strip away all freedoms of Christians in government and in America. In other words, if you're not in agreement with their form or their version of a Catholic is or a religion is, then you can't hold public office, and by the way, you can't get a job. That's what they're beginning to strip away. All right, is strip all Christians of their liberties, including banning Christians from gathering teachings on public or the internet and reversing all policies to promote Christians' far-right nationalist agenda. That's already beginning to take place. It stopped for a while because many of the churches, the independent church community, some of our churches that we had were renting or using public libraries. Well, during the Obama administration, that was stopped. It was reversed, and Christians couldn't come in and use the public libraries in many states. All right? They were going to reverse all that and to promote Christians and their far-right nationalist agendas, such as repealing any Christian exemptions for things like abortion, vaccines, and other common sense medicine. So in other words, if you're of faith, your church, you're a private Catholic school or Christian school, and you apply for exemption from these, you won't get it. No one's going to be exempt from what the government tells you you're going to do. So, this is actually in the letter. It says, we urge you not to underestimate the institutional strength of what we refer to interchangeably in this article is the document as Christian nationalist movement or the religious right. In other words, don't underestimate these people, is what they're telling the Biden administration. So this movement is extraordinarily well-funded and well-organized. It is political ideology, is anti-democratic and anti-scientific. It's theology-based. It's God-based is what they're trying to tell you. So don't underestimate these people is what they're trying to say. And it goes on. Its agenda rests on a pinched interpretation of biblical principles preached by Christian nationalist leadership and thought leaders. With their political agenda sanctioned by a higher power, their base of support is disciplined, motivated, and deeply committed to a vision that does not align with our basic constitutional values and democratic principles. This is word for word out of that document that was put together by government representatives in Congress to turn over to the Biden administration in their transition team to make sure that when they begin to make the transitions, they keep all of this on the forefront so that they can eliminate these Christians from having anything to do with messing up our country. That's what's going on. This document is I consider pretty dangerous. The policy decisions that should be guided by science and evidence on matters ranging from climate change to comprehensive sex education to federal funding for stem cell research have been skewed and blocked entirely by powerful religious interest groups and further undermined at every turn by the Trump administration. Well, everybody, those who disliked Trump and hated who he was, didn't like his personality, he did do a lot for the Christian movement to give us the protections we needed under the Constitution, including this: sex education and STEM research means abortion. Because they're going to put all those things back that this man moved out of the way. We're going to put it all back. And they're saying don't underestimate the right, and all those Christians, they're going to fight you on it, so don't take them lightly. That's what they're trying to say. So now what I have here, this is the actual for the entire article. This is, you can freeze this session. When you get your News Nuggets and Insight this week, just freeze this, write all this down, and then go read all this for yourself. What I'm telling you here is ought to be concerning for every Christian, especially God's people, because God shows us in the book of Revelation that Satan knows he has but a short time. He's going to go after the elect. Right now, God has kept all of us protected and safe. That is all going to change really quickly in the next administration, should the Biden administration take over, which it looks like it will happen. I know there's still people saying, no, they're going to turn the election around again. And if they did, so be it. But at this particular junction, I don't really see that that's possible. But, you know, you hold out for whatever you can hold out for till the very last. God can do whatever he wants to do. But to me, it looks like he's given us enough warning over the last 4 years. through all of these things, the nation still got worse. Debt got worse. We ran into all kinds of problems, and here we are again. Same way we're, and it's not going to get any better in 4 more years. It's only going to get worse. So there you have it. So now let's go through and let's begin to wrap this section up before we get into the second. So our Constitution was made only for a moral and a religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Now we've used this before. You probably read it. It's talk about the government we have was made for a religious people. All right, it doesn't work for anybody else. And truly, when they try to take our republic and they put it in other countries, it's always failed. It's never worked. And it's because it was designed for a people who have a moral conscience. But did you know where it came from? So let me bring you in something here that maybe you didn't know. This is a little nugget I'm going to bring out. That was come from a letter by John Adams to the Massachusetts militia, 11th October, 1798. By the way, that's when the full Constitution went into effect. He wrote this: "But should the people of America once become capable of that deep simulation towards one another and towards foreign nations, which assumes the language of justice and moderation, while it is practicing iniquity and extravagance, and displays the most captivating manner of charming pictures and of candor and frankness and sincerity, while it is rioting and rapine and insolence." Now let's stop for just a second. You might want to freeze this, and you might want to go back and read this 2 or 3 times, because what he just wrote here to the militia is exactly what our nation is going through. As I read the language that's being written, how flowery it was and how nice it sounds, and how they make their arguments to make it sound like these far-right people are evil. At the same time, they're having all type of problems going on while they sound so charming. And that's what's been going on in America right now. It says, while it is rioting and rapine and insolence. The rebellion that's been going on across the nation is unbelievable. At the same time, they have such charming words about the way they're doing things. This country will be the most miserable habitation in the world. It isn't that what we're beginning to see? In other words, if this nation doesn't change, what he was writing back then, he says, this nation's not made for this kind of stuff. Our nation was built on freedoms because people wanted to follow God of their own. It went on. It says, because we have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions and unbridled morality and religion. He's saying, listen, we don't have any laws against that. That's what we are. In other words, this is what we want to be. But when you break those laws down, what happens then? And that's where he's talking about the anarchy that follows through. Avarice, ambition, revenge, and gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale through a net. And that's what you're seeing. And who was the spearhead that finally got it broke? BLM. Through the BLM, they took the emotions of the people of an unjustified murder of an individual, George Floyd, and they used that to ramp across the world to destroy what existed. No, it was a tragedy. Never should have happened. But it was used. And because of that, they were able to bring in millions and millions and billions of dollars to fund them and move into government to begin to change everything. It was warned way back in 1798 that if it ever happened, this is what would take place. So our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. In other words, it only works because we all voluntarily choose to follow God first and his laws and the laws that exist to man. When you get away from that, there's nothing in this nation is going to be able to prevent what is coming. And he says it's going to, when that happens, he says it's going to be the most miserable place in the world to exist. That's prophetic. That's exactly where we are today as a nation. But I wanted to bring this to you because we use the quote, and most of the time you'll see it quoted, but it doesn't tell you where it comes from and why. But there we are today, and that's where we are. All right, let's take a break. All right, when we come back, today we're going to go into lying witnesses and to show you how we get to where we are and the warnings that God gives us. All right, lying witness, it's America's religious freedoms. All right, let's take a look at this video, and we'll be right back. We played that video just over a month ago, but it was so important with the subject we're talking about today. We wanted to bring it back in again and apply it here because it is important where we're going today. So now let's talk about something else that ties all this together according to what the Bible talks about, is lying witnesses. You know, the Bible actually speaks a lot about the lying witnesses. So let's take a look at a few of the scriptures that God refers to. John 15:20 says, remember what I told you, a servant is not greater than his master. He said, if they have persecuted me, they will persecute you also. So why is that important? What has that got to do with lying witnesses? Well, Matthew 26:59 tells us. It says, now the chief priests and the elders and all the council sought false witnesses against Jesus to put him to death. So what Jesus is saying is, listen, what they did to me, they're going to do to you. Not only what they did to him, talking about persecuting and crucifying him, the manner in which they did it is also going to be coming into play. One of the things is if they can't disprove you or they can't destroy your credibility, then they'll bring people in who's going to lie about you and bring that up so they can finally get you out the way. It's just one of the ways. Lying witnesses. Look in the book of Exodus, verses 1 and 2, chapter 23. It says, you shall not raise a false report. Put not your hand to the wicked to be an unrighteous witness, and you shall not follow a multitude to do evil, and neither shall you speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment. In other words, you can't follow everybody else. You can't follow a false witness or a liar. And don't go with the crowd, basically, is what he's saying. Going on, here's another one. Deuteronomy 19, verse 15. It says, one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity, or for any sin, and any sin that he sins. At the mouth of two witnesses, or at the mouth of three witnesses, shall the matter be established. In other words, you can't just have one person. We've seen what happened when we had the people who were being nominated for the Supreme Court. How one person would come up and said, this is what this man did. Automatically take that person's word and destroy the credibility and character of an individual. And if they can happen to a person who's going into the Supreme Court decision in the influence that that person has, what chance do you and I have when the left begins to raise people lying witnesses, even if it's only one, to try to prevent the word of God from getting out? Eventually, that's where it's going to go to. Let's go on. How about this? Verse 16, if a false witness rises up against any man to testify against him, which is wrong, then both of the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord and before the priests and the judges, which shall be in those days. In other words, you have court. You bring it before God, and you bring it for a judge to hear the matter. And the judge shall make a diligent inquisition, for behold, if the witness be false witness, and shall testify falsely against his brother, going on, says, then you shall do to him as he had thought to do to his brother, and so you shall put the evil away from among you. So we have a problem now. So what God's saying, so listen, if you got a matter, you can't hear against one person. But if you got a couple people come and then you bring it to court and you judge the matter, if the person is found to be lying, then you have to put that evil out to camp. Get rid of that people. What happens with the news media? What happens when an entire media system goes against what you believe? And each media, each representative, each person who's on television takes the same lie and says it over and over and over again. That is where we are today. When you have a media controlled through a monopoly, who's in support of a government, who's against another side, you no longer have a free nation. That's what happened in pre-war Germany, when eventually they wound up taking all the media and all the press, they wound up shutting them down, or they owned them, and it was only one voice that went out. You're getting pretty close to that right now in many circles. There's not many voices that will protect and raise a voice to the right to protect the Christian movement. So, going on. Lying witnesses. 16 through 20. And those which remain, this is going on. So now, you put the evil out. It says, then those which remain shall hear and fear, and shall henceforth commit no more such evil from among you. If the media had to pay a price for their lies, that would begin to stop. Here's another thing. Isn't it amazing that those in the Congress and the Senate, while they're in session, they can lie as much as they want, and nothing can be done to them? No recourse, no action. Where the very law established by God says, if they're found to be lying, you got to put them out. Get rid of those people. It says, an eye shall not pity, but life shall go on for life, for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So what God's saying, if you don't take care of the problem, it's going to get worse and worse. You got to get rid of it. But we present laws that protect the liar, the Congress and the Senate. By law, they are protected, and they can say and do anything they want. Destroy anyone's character and anyone's life. Proverbs. A faithful witness will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. Verse 12, it says, there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is the way of death. Going on, Proverbs. A false witness shall not be unpunished. I like that. He shall not be unpunished. In other words, you shall punish him. Don't let him get by with this. And he that speaks lies shall not escape. Well, God says this is important. But we got an entire nation from the government, and Isaiah says they're sick from the head to the toe, from the government all the way through to the media, who's controlling the narrative. And if you dare raise your voice against this, what did we start today with? That lady who lost her job after 27 years of serving kids who are in need, all children, all color, she said, for 27 years. Out, you're done. You disagree with the narrative. Based upon what? False information. It says, a false witness shall not be unpunished, but he that speaks lies shall perish. That's strong words. This is coming from God's holy word, where we're at today. All right, so let's begin to wrap this up. Look at King David. Psalm 27, verse 12. It says, deliver me not unto the will of mine enemies, for false witnesses arise up against me, and as such breathe out cruelty. This was David when he had to run for his life. That is what's going to happen to God's people at the end time. There'll be voices rising up, cruel voices, to destroy the word of God before Jesus Christ returns. All right, that's it. Let's wrap up now. In the mail last week, Familiar Spirits with Danny Ellis that just went out. And we also sent out news nuggets and insights from December 4th. So make sure that if you're not on the mailing list, get on the mailing list. Going out next week, we have a quarterly. Here's the quarterly, the main story of the quarterly. November 3rd, 2020, the second Pearl Harbor. Wrote a quite lengthy story about what's going on there. So hopefully if you're not on the mailing list, you get on the mailing list and you can get your quarterly magazine in about a week. You'll be getting it. And with that, the sermon given last month, Breach of America's Walls, talking about how the election actually breached the walls of what's going on in our nation. That'll go out next, the newsletter will go out. Also online, we recommend during the season that we're in right now, there's a 3-part series. It's actually not 3 parts, but it covers 3 different areas of paganism, believe it or not. Christmas, Mardi Gras, and Easter, showing the greatest fraud ever perpetrated on mankind. You can go online and you can get all 3 of these. You can watch them right from your own living room or your bedroom, wherever you watch your television. And if you haven't looked at these in a while, take a few moments during the holidays and take a look at these and show you how important it is to follow God's truth. Next week, as it stands right now, unless something changes, you know how COVID is, Chuck Baker will be in town, and he will be delivering the sermon December 26th. That's actually this Sabbath coming up, December 26th, Chuck Baker. That's it. That's all for our program. All right, we got one more video that I want to share with you today. It's a very uplifting video. It's called A New Thing. Take a look. We'll be right back to close the program. Well, that's it for our program again. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Hope you understand that what we go through is each and every week we try to take information that's so important and dissect it, put it in light of God's holy word and prophetic insight that God allows all of God's people to understand as we go through these. Because you see, the world is being taken without ever knowing it. They'll be taken to the abyss. And before they ever realize it, it's going to be too late to change. So be sure each week as we ask you, take this information, pray about it, look into it, study it, read the scriptures that we bring to you, and most of all, make sure that you send this to everybody you know. They're going to love you for it, or not. Till next week, stay safe during these holidays. It's torrential out there. Take care, and God bless.